You actually think that physics changes as you get further away from Earth. So
that's right. I don't think they can get anyone beyond the Van Allen radiation belts.
Right. So for all you don't rule out the secret space program,
oh yeah, there may well be.
you
Anti-gravity definitely exists. I've got Victor Schauberger's books somewhere. His work was sequestered by the Nazis right back in the 30s. I think they called it torsion physics, which leads absolutely straight into your work on the TR3B.
Now, in the final section, I'd discuss what the reason might be. So let's say that the hypothesis is true, that they're faking all of these missions to Mars. One would imagine it's to conceal something which perhaps is on Mars, and I've listed what may be there. Evidence of past advanced civilizations, human or otherwise, inhabited man-made bases that have already been set up in secret spacecraft or spaceports, the fact that the planet's makeup might be significantly different to accepted scientific theory, and I think Douglas Gibson is of that mind.
The physics of Mars is probably completely different to Earth, and that's essentially what they're hiding, what they don't want us thinking about.
Right. Do you want to expand on that as to what you think it might be like on Mars?
Well, my background is, like you say, in theosophy, in the theosophical worldview, rather than consciousness evolving as a kind of peripherally around matter. Matter has evolved from consciousness. That sounds like I'll be accused of being unscientific, but actually you can't prove either of those sets of assumptions. It's just as valid to start from the that different standpoint.
Let me share that with you then, Douglas, because I've not delved into a great deal into this thing called consciousness on Richplanet, and scientists will agree, or some scientists will agree, that in order to observe the universe, observe everything that there is, there must be consciousness, and that consciousness must be detached in some way or different in some way from physical matter or even space. So you have to have consciousness in order to experience the world, and this consciousness element is possibly vastly underplayed or even completely ignored in modern science. But what Douglas is saying is that consciousness is probably the most important of the two.
Yeah, consciousness itself is more fundamental than matter, in my opinion. The problem kind of goes back to the split between alchemy and science about 500 years ago. So science itself kind of grew out of alchemy. Newton himself started out as an alchemist. What seems to be forgotten along the way is that science itself can still be placed back within a larger alchemical context, if you like, which does indeed say that when you travel certain distances away from the Earth, all our physical constants start to change. The speed of light becomes different, which also ties in with Rupert Sheldrake's talk. Was it earlier this year?
There are other things that people have suggested whereby the non-physical element of humans, our soul, if you want to call it that, somehow resonates with the planet itself, and that by taking your physical body away from the Earth, you're disconnecting it from some kind of field, maybe a morphic field or the akashic field, and that you would lose your marbles if you travel more than, let's say, 1 million miles from the Earth.
Well, exactly. I mean, I try to avoid sort of terms like astral and try to use modern scientific terms, which you can do instead. But just what you were talking about just then in Nexus magazine in August, they had an article about the strange experiences of the Russian cosmonauts experiencing exactly the things you've just been talking about, altered states of consciousness once you travel a certain distance from the Earth. So there's a change in your consciousness and in matter itself. So when you get to the Van Allen radiation belts, the radiation you're experiencing it isn't really floating around in space, which is a kind of questionable concept in itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually radiation coming from the atoms of your own body, your own spaceship. It's the beginnings of this, I suppose I'd have to call it an alchemical change in the atoms of your body, but also in your consciousness as well. It's a change in the relationship between the two. It is very, very interesting. I mean, it's just a huge... It's a whole area of science that we're being very carefully
steered away from. Right.
Exactly, and specifically by NASA.
And if it were true, it would turn everything on its head.
Absolutely.
You're saying that the cover-up in this is something quite profound and fundamental, rather than just the fact that there might be aliens on Mars.
Exactly.
You're saying it's something fundamental about the understanding of everything that is.
Absolutely. It's about the relationship between consciousness and matter, what they used to call alchemy, but which you can look at in absolutely strictly scientific modern ways. There's nothing unscientific or irrational about thinking about consciousness itself.
Right. Okay.
And it changes everything when you do.
What came first, consciousness or matter?
Exactly.
Have we got a situation where the rovers are really on Earth, but the orbiters are really going around Mars, or are the orbiters not going around Mars either? You know, and we're seeing some other images. That's a question I think that would need to be resolved. Or have they somehow managed to set things up such that, you know, we're going to end up arguing about the authenticity of all the images and call all the images into question? Because this is something we've seen that happen with 9/11 imagery as well, which, you know, we haven't got time to go into. But so the overall overarching thing, I think, is to cover up secret technology. That's so these rover programs have now become the equivalent of Apollo, in that a lot of good minds, you know, with highly skilled technical abilities, detailed technical knowledge, they're now soaked up into those sorts of programs, and they're not going to be sort of entertaining the idea of black programs, secret technologies, and this sort of thing. They're all helping unwittingly to keep all of that covered up. That it may just be that the rover program is all part of that perception management operation. That's quite possible.
It may well be that they put the rover on a rocket and then just crash it into the back of the moon, or you know, into the ocean, and then they're all being duped by images that are being sent back by some other covert team.
Right.
It's, I think, unless we have a completely independent citizen-based space program where Tom, Dick and Harry can build their own craft and get it to Mars and then go and film their technology on Mars, I'm not going to believe it. Do you see what I mean? Independent verification.
And I mean, if we look at how difficult that is, I mean, if we take the, we talked a little bit about this, of the recent crash of the Virgin Spaceship 2 that broke up just after it was released from the plane. I mean, that's a kind of a civilian space program. And
it's, I don't buy what happened there. It's to me, they're trying to put into the public's mind that anything above the Earth's atmosphere is really difficult, folks. There's no way civilians can manage it.
Right, right.
Whether Branson's in on that or not, I don't know. I've stuck my neck out and said I'm 75% sure. I think Andrew's right on the fence, but you're convinced.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I say, I only intend to spend an hour kind of dismissing the idea, and the whole subject, every time I've looked, it's exactly the same as Apollo. Like I say, you take any aspect and try and get to the bottom of the science behind it, and pretty soon everything's falling apart in your hands.
And once you become convinced, do you feel annoyed about it?
I did initially, yeah. I mean, you do. The same as with Apollo. This is one of the biggest problems. What's that famous saying? It's difficult to deceive people, but it's even harder to convince them that they have been deceived.
Yeah.
Because then, of course, their pride's involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, when you try and broach a subject like this, people start getting angry.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. But you've got over that.
Yeah. I've got over it.
You start. It comes to the point where you actually start to laugh at it. I did manage to get a photograph of the operators taken from behind their shoulders, and we'll just have a look at what they're looking at on the screen. Remember, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.